Hello everyone, my name is Shelby and this is the series where I reveal what is inside these mystery pottery molds I found on Gumtree. Hello and welcome to Mould.55, and when I say I have peaked as an artist, I mean it. This week's results are absolutely amazing and I can't wait to show you at the end. So I pour this mold up and it has 5 holes in total, 3 on one side, 1 on the opposite side, and then 1 on the shorter end side. So the way I kept the clay nice and soft so that it would all set at the same time is whilst one side was dripping out, I would pour the other side and then keep doing that until all the holes had been poured up. There's not much trick to it, it's just keeping an eye on it. I opened it up to reveal these gorgeous little frog friends. They are so gorgeous, and this mold is really special to me because my grandma used to collect these little frogs, and it is so special to find something that she probably has in her collection. It is so beautiful and they're so sassy as well. So let's have a look at this mold. So as I said before, it's got the holes on lots of sides, so all the tiny little frogs. It has a little carving out that has frogs written on it, but all the labels have sort of worn off. You can kind of read a 1979 and a Kimple on it, but other than that, there's not much indication of what the title of this mold is. When I opened the mold to clean it, it had a lot of terracotta or like a red clay debris from the previous owner, and that was left on the clay when I did the first pour. Usually the first pour you chuck out if it looks like this and you're trying to get rid of stain on the clay, but I thought this could be cool and this could be an opportunity to see something really magical in these pieces. After the first pour, I accidentally dropped the mold and I was kicking myself. I couldn't believe I dropped it. I've never dropped one. And of course it chipped as well. So I made up a plaster with PVA glue mix and glued it back together. It is fine now, but I couldn't believe this mold that I was so nostalgic, so precious, so sentimental to me, I broke. But it doesn't impact the casting itself. And it is quite an old, it's a little bit deteriorated, this mold as well. So for another cast of this mold, I used some Chrysanthos green stain, ultra stains. I mixed it in some water, then added it to the clay, unlike my previous videos where I just rush and just dump the powdered material into the clay. And then what I'm going to do is pour a set and marble some green and yellow stained clay to get some sort of cool little textured little froggies coming out. I figured there's already quite a bit of staining happening in this mold. I'm not afraid to sort of experiment with some really heavily pigmented clay. So I give that a bit more of a marble, and if you've seen a few of my other videos, I've had some difficulties marbling clay. I've had some huge problems with it, as in like I just can't get it right, or I'm not getting enough pigment so you can't even see the marbling if there is any. But this is looking very promising. As I open the mold after marbling the clay, it is so magical and so very cool. You can see the yellow and the green clay have all melded together like a marble, and they look amazing, and it just gives them an extra element of uniqueness that I'm absolutely thrilled with. So that's our first win, our absolute first win of this mold. So what I do is I trim these ones up, I take that pouring spout off, and when I trim them, I'm just being extra cautious that I am preserving the marbleness and keeping that nice and consistent, because if you cut away too much of the seams or the base where that pouring spout is, you can lose the pattern of the marble because you've carved away too much. And also if you sponge your pieces down to remove that seam, you can completely lose the pattern and it becomes really obvious that there was a seam there. So you just have to be really cautious of that. These are the pieces that were from that original casting after bisque. I wanted to make sure that they didn't do any funny business in the kiln because I don't know what clay this is. And you can see that my white clay has melded with that really rich orange clay, and it's given a really cool effect. So I'm kind of hoping that it will come out in the final firing. It might not because my firing temperature might be too high or too low, but I decided to add a really soft layer of an olive green, hoping that it will complement that orange if it is present, and you'll be able to sort of see flecks of it through this green. So I don't know what I'm hoping to see, but I don't know because I've never used a red clay in slip molds and I've got no idea what the previous user was using. So let's just see what happens. So I cover all of those, and this mold is just I had so many ideas, and this video has so many ideas in it. So it's probably just me jibber-jabbing about every single little process I've done, because every time I get something small, you guys are like, make a mug. So I'm making a mug. I had to cut the little froggies in half and attach them to a mug, because why not? We've got to have a pail for our mush mug. So I chopped them in half, and then I realized that these frogs, they kind of sit out really far, whereas the mushrooms from an earlier reveal, you could cut them in half and they could sort of sit and sort of work with the mug, whereas these sort of hang out. And I'm okay with that. I just wasn't really, I don't know, I kind of rushed it, I think, because I was trying to get it out in time, but I'm not sure how I feel about them sitting out so far with a gap in between their heads and the mug. We will see how it goes once it's fired. And with the mush mug, one of my biggest queries was, do I paint something in the background? And so because I wasn't really wrapped with how far the frogs were hanging out, I decided let's just add some flowers and see how it actually looks, and whether it adds to the piece or whether it's too distracting or whether it's too much. It's just good to have a play now that I'm not really sure if I like this mug. So I decided to do some really basic flowers. So when I say basic, little detail, so just a bold shape, color, and then your little yellow center of the flower, as well as some little leaves around there without too much detail, just so it doesn't detract from the frogs that are in the foreground. And then I was saying that there's so many ideas this week is because I love this mold, and I thought, how cool would it be to take an idea from another mystery mold where I did a little sort of like saucer where I added resin in the center of it, and I thought, why don't I turn that into like a lily pad pond and do like the lily pads as like pressed flowers, and then put the frogs onto the pressed flowers, and it'd be like a flower lily pad dish. And it could be like a ring dish. So I really had this idea, and I was like, we're going for this. So I added lots of mix of glaze onto the plate and just laid it in hope that the glaze would mesmerize and mix together to make a pond water looking finish. And then we'll add the resin on top with some flowers, and then put the frogs and set the frogs in the resin, and hopefully it'll be like little frogs in a pond. I was like, I'm doing this. So I popped them into the kiln. I squeezed the little frogs in between all the little gaps in the kiln throughout the week. I put it on overnight, and I was so stoked with the finished result of the kiln load. This is not the finished result, but this is the finished result of the kiln load, and already I could have just left this plate as is. It is so nice. I've got that lovely green rim around the outside. The glazes I have used have given me the exact result I wanted, which is like a mesmerizing blue pond, and with the contrast of the green that's meant to be like a grass area around the pond, it looks so cool. My face looked disgusted here, but I was not. I was like in shock with how awesome the glaze came out, and I actually really like the frog mug in the end. But let's finish off our little pond lily pad concept, and then I'll show you the finished results of everything all together and all the reactions of the clay, the glazes, how they all came out. So here's our beautiful pond water. It's almost a shame to add stuff to it because it's just got this really beautiful color work happening. This video is 3 weeks in the making because I didn't just press these flowers the day before I needed them. I was actually pretty prepared and pressed them in advance. I'm using my nice little hose link snips. They are the best size for clipping flowers back. I adore these. I won them in a giveaway a few years back, I reckon, and they have gone through me through thick and thin with my flower clippings. I grabbed a lot of stuff that was in flower. I'm not going to be using it all on the plate, but I just wanted to share the process because it's quite peaceful and relaxing, I find, and it's a really nice hobby I have. So much so I filled my pressed flower pot completely up, and I need to find a new storage system for them so I can like sort the different species and colors and everything in their own little box. So with pressing flowers, I've just got my little cardboard thing, and I literally just use these and put the flowers straight on top. I don't use any parchment paper. I've found that I haven't needed it. And then I put the lid on top, I give it a bit of a squish, and then I put the bolts in, and away we go. Throughout the week, I sort of might just check if I need to squish it a bit smaller because the flowering gum can sit up quite a bit. But otherwise, they came out really beautiful, and I'm really excited to use these. And it's even more special because I'm using something that I've grown in my own garden in an artwork that I'm really proud of. So that's really special. So now we have our flowers all out. I'm not using all of the ones from the press, but some I've also had stored away from previous pressing. But this is the idea we're going with. We're going to mix up some resin and we're going to put the flowers and some little eucalyptus leaves that so coincidentally look like little lily pads into a layer of resin. I'm going to let that cure, and then I'm going to add another layer of resin and then sit the frogs on top so that it looks like the frogs are sitting on flower lily pads. I also found some really tiny little dried paper daisies that were just starting to bud that look like little lily pad flowers as well. So I add that resin, I plonk all my little froggies on top, and it is so perfect. I love it so much. It is so cute. So the resin acts as like a glue to hold them in place, like it holds the flowers in place. So it's almost like, yeah, they're resting in the water. It would been even cooler if I like dyed the resin a certain color so it had like a layering of color like I've seen some resin people use, but at the same time I didn't want to take away from that beautiful glaze underneath. As I said before, here are the finished results. Now that we've got that one curing, I can show off the rest of it. I actually love how this frog mug came out. The flowers just, I think, complement it without taking away from the little froggies. Here are our terracotta red clay froggies. You can't really see any red on these at all. I would assume that it either burnt out or maybe that red just transforms a little bit in the kiln firing. But the green is nice and speckled and they remind me of the vintage frogs my grandma used to collect. And then here are the marbled pieces. The marbled ones are so amazing. It's not as dark as I thought it was going to be, but the marbling is so beautiful and so mesmerizing and unique on every single one. I think I have started to understand how marbling works with the clay, which is really exciting. And here is my peak. My absolute peak as an artist. I love this piece so much. So I'm going to use this as sort of like a ring dish, a jewelry dish with my little frog friends. All the flowers are covered in resin, so they will be protected. The paper daisies won't crumple. Or isn't it special? I haven't even spoken about how sassy the frogs are and how grumpy they look. I just love them. They're just so cute and quirky. And I love the one that's on its side that's like, hello. They're the best. I have had some favorite molds, but these ones feel like my spirit mold, like a spirit animal. They just are so sassy and grumpy, and I relate to that in so many ways. What do you think of this week's reveal? I adore it. Thank you so much for watching this week's reveal, and here's your sneak peek for next week.